Okay. Okay. This is Andy. I'm going to convene our meeting of the Burlington Planning Commission for Tuesday, November 15th, 2022. First, just apologize for these technical difficulties that we seem to be having. Happen sometimes. And as Megan was just saying, the primary part of our meeting today is we have two public hearings. And given that people like some of us might be having trouble getting access to this meeting, we're going to have the public hearing, begin the public hearings today, but keep them open for another meeting as well for those people who weren't able to get through to today. So having said that, first item on our agenda is the agenda. Are there any changes to it?
No changes to the agenda.
Okay. So no changes, it seems like. So we have our agenda as presented. Item 2 is the public forum. This is an opportunity for members of the public to speak to us on any item they would like. As I said before, we do have two public hearings, and if you'd like to speak during the public hearings or on one of those items, if you can, we'd ask that you wait till the public hearing. If not, you could speak now and we will apply your comments to the public hearing. Charles, is there anyone who wants to speak during the public forum?
Andy, I believe Barbara Hedrick has her hand raised. I will allow you to talk, Barbara. If you'd like to speak generally, now's the time, but if you'd like to speak to either the Trinity Amendment or the South End Amendment, please hold your comment for the open forum at that time.
I would like to speak now regarding Trinity because I'm very likely going to be interrupted in about 15 minutes. So,
okay, that'd be
okay. So I'd like to talk about the uses that are being allowed within the Trinity campus. One of them is dry cleaners. And early in my career, I was responsible for estimating how much money a Fortune 5 company needed to put away to clean up brownfields. And so I'm very familiar with brownfields and how far contamination can go. And for example, with dry cleaners and other brownfields, contamination can travel a mile around where the pollution actually occurred. And dry cleaners are really a chemical-based manufacturing type of process. There's a lot of pollution with dry cleaning. It's not essential to UVM's educational mission. You know, it's not like a chemistry lab or a medical testing facility. It's not necessary for UVM's mission. So I would like to ask, please, that you change that from permitted to not permitted, or alternatively say no actual dry cleaning on site. It could just be a pickup and drop off operation, because if there is a dry cleaning operation on UVM campus, and if the contamination occurs, which is very likely, then the surrounding neighborhood will be adversely impacted from both a health and economic perspective. And we've seen that in other campus areas. I think there are issues right now in Dartmouth where there was an off-campus dry cleaning and that happened. So we really want to keep that operation as far away from residential neighborhoods as possible. It should be more in a manufacturing or commercial district. Second use I'm concerned about is parking garages. There are two zoning amendment sentences where it indicates that parking garages really don't fit with the concept of these institutional zones. And I'll just point out it's zoning amendment lines 8 through 10 and zoning amendment lines 17 through 18. So 8 through 10 says the institutional core campus overlay districts are intended to provide reasonable future growth for the institutions within their core respective campus without further intrusion into the surrounding residential neighborhoods. And then line 17 to 18 says parking should be very limited and provided off-site. Where parking is provided, it can be hidden either within or underneath a structure. So a parking garage is not, indicates it could be a standalone parking garage. And so it really is in conflict with those words on line 17 and 18. So I'd really like to see parking garages to become conditional use rather than an approved use. And there are 4 reasons beyond those texts where there's some conflict. One, the joint institutional parking management plan. The Planning Commission and the DRB have said they want UVM to reduce the number of single occupancy vehicles to have 8,000 commuters coming in every day from surrounding towns into Burlington. That's a lot of miles being traveled. Building a parking garage continues that pattern of SOV driving. So we really should look at parking garages in the context of how well is UVM doing with its joint institutional parking management plan and with its TDM plan. And by just giving a blanket, it's okay to build a parking garage, you're defeating the purpose of the joint institutional parking management plan metrics and the TDM. Third reason is the Planning Commission told Burlington High School you can't have more parking. So why are you going to give UVM a rubber stamp okay on all the parking they want to build, regardless of what they're doing for joint institutional parking management plan or TDM? But you're telling the high school you can't have this. People should be using more greener ways to get to the high school, even for state championships where people are traveling from far. There's a real inconsistency there. And then last, parking garages adversely impact surrounding neighborhoods. You think about Gutterson Garage when that was built on Spear Street. All those houses across from Spear Street changed from owner occupied to rental. And then the houses on the back of those properties also changed to rentals because the neighborhood just eroded with the construction of that parking garage. It attracts traffic, it attracts crime, drugs, rape, thievery, pollution. It's not good to the surrounding neighborhood. So please change parking garages to a conditional use with the concept of let's see how UVM is doing with its TDM, joint institutional parking management plan, and reducing SOVs. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Charles, do we have anybody else for the public forum?
Okay. I'm just going to make an announcement about comment right now. If you do have a general comment not specific to the Trinity Amendment or the South End Innovation District Amendment, you can speak now. If you would like to speak to either of those amendments, we will take your comment at that time. So if you would like to speak now, please use the raise your hand icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Otherwise, we will move forward in our agenda and take comments with each amendment. Andy, it appears all of those who are here would like to speak later.
Okay, good. Thank you. So we'll close the public forum and move on to item 3, which is the chair's report. And I don't have anything to report, so we'll go on to item 4, which is director's report. Hagan.
So Andy, I'll say, just given the technical difficulties we're having tonight, I'll skip my director's report and give you a more full report in December. So trying to prioritize time for the people who are here so they can speak.
Okay, thank you. So then we'll move on to item 5, which is public hearing on proposed ZA-22-04 UVM Trinity Campus zoning. And Charles or Megan, did you want to kick this one off and just give a little background, and we'll open it up to the public hearing comments?
Sure, I'll give a brief introduction, Andy, and then we're happy to take any questions if you have them. The zoning amendment in front of you is a request originally from the University of Vermont to facilitate greater development of student housing on the Trinity campus, as well as a mix of uses that can support neighborhood and commercial amenities and create a vibrant residential community. The amendment would also allow for the reorganization of buildings and open spaces to activate the campus, and create synergy with planned walking and biking improvements on Colchester Avenue. The amendment does intend to minimize parking in the area and ensure adequate bike facilities, and would, if new parking is created, focus on structured parking. So the gist of the requested changes are really to allow more height in specific areas of the Trinity campus, to increase the lot coverage to 60%, and to revise the setbacks along Colchester Avenue. Happy to go into more detail. You all have discussed this at length, but I will leave it at that for now. Megan, I don't know if you had any to add. There is one, I should also add. The amendment does also establish a new sort of framework for the submission of a conceptual plan that would need to be submitted by the University of Vermont. It does not officially it should not be officially approved by the city, but it should provide context for how individual developments relate to anticipated future user groups, and allow the city to anticipate and plan for sort of broader growth of the university within its campus.
And one point I think I'll just add here is that everything that is contained in this amendment is specific to the Trinity campus. These changes do not have an impact on other areas of the institutional zone or any other institutional core campus overlay districts.
Okay, thank you. So commissioners will all have a chance to weigh in and discuss this after the public hearing. But before we get to that, any questions or comments on what Charles or Megan were just telling us before we open up the public hearing? And I can't see anyone, obviously. So if anyone wants to speak, just chime in.
It doesn't look like anyone is chiming in, Andy.
Okay. All right, then let's open up the public hearing. And this is an opportunity for members of the public to speak to us on this item as part of our public hearing. And Charles, I'll turn it over to you to recognize people who want to speak.
Again, we do not have any raised hands. Again, we'll just say we do have. We'll move to Keith Pillsbury, and then we'll go to Tom Darenthal, and then Jason Van Drysch. So we'll start with Keith Pillsbury.
Charles, just really quick, I don't see her raising her hand again, but Lisa Kingsbury did have her hand raised before.
Okay, so we'll start with Keith. We'll go to Lisa, and then Tom, and then Jason. I will leave that cue in the chat.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I'm not usually a fan of UVM because I've been your neighbor for 48 years, and you've consistently increased the number of students, and the neighborhood that I live in, University Terrace, has had an impact on that. But from looking at the words that UVM uses in its proposal, it looks like they're willing to build more housing. Now, I think 500 is very small compared to what we have across my street and up the hill a bit, which is the athletic campus, where there's over 1,900 students there. And I remember when they wanted to build University Heights, there was all kinds of screaming on my street and the next streets over. And, there's 1,900 people there. We wouldn't know they even existed there, except when we go up Main Street, when they have to cross Main Street to go to main campus. So sometimes people can get overexcited about, I know I'm an old Vermonter, and I know Vermonters hate change, but if UVM is going to bring in the numbers of students that they are from away, I was discouraged to see that they have 84% of our students at the university are not Vermonters. That really shows that we need to provide more housing for them so that we can give a greater priority to Vermont workers who want to work in Burlington, and allowing to use the housing units in the area of the core city to be available for people who are actually working in the city, or want to start a career in the city, or want to start a family in the city. So I am excited that that UVM says they want to get as many housing on the Trinity campus as possible. I think that we need to think about ourselves as not a little village anymore. We are a city that a lot of people want to come to, that like our politics, they like our athletics, they like whatever. We need to think about 6, 7, 8, 9 stories in our buildings, and to me, that is what needs to happen if people want to come here, so that people can find affordable housing in the center of the city, so that they can work in the various service industries and various offices in our city. So I am totally in favor of UVM building as many units as possible on that. I think 2,000 would be a good balance with the athletic campus that we have on this side. Ward 6 and Ward 1 are sort of where the university campuses are, our residences are, and it would be a better balance if more housing were built on University Terrace, so that we wouldn't have this political fight over redistricting. I also think that this idea that you have to have a lawn that's 100 and some odd feet long is sort of a fantasy, in that we live next to the university, and we're constantly woken up by their mowing machines and their blowers or whatever. So, and we don't ever see very many students using those lawns. So people were against University Heights. I think that was done very well. There's not a lot of parking there. I do agree that we should limit the parking on our campus, and say to our students from away, bring your suitcases on a plane, or have your parents bring you, but do not bring a car. And I also wanted to say that I've just lost that whole thought, that basically there's other spaces on the university campus where it could be built, but we got to start thinking about density. If we want to have a university that's going to grow and yet be able to allow Vermont workers, young and old, be able to live in the city and be able to live without a car, be able to walk to work, be able to play at the lake. The thing that keeps coming back to me is that we talk about, no silos or whatever they are, no canyons. Well, I happen to go to church at Cathedral St. Paul's and down College Street. That doesn't feel like a canyon to me. It feels like an urban center. We are an urban. We say we are urban. I keep wondering if Cathedral Square could have built that our senior housing project on Street Cathedral at the Cathedral St. Paul, if people were so concerned about height back in the 70s. We got that up there, and it's doing a really good service for our disabled and elderly. And I think we should be doing the same thing, moving our students out of the city into campus with a vibrant campus that university could provide. That's my comments tonight. Thank you.
All right, next we will go to Lisa Kingsbury.
Thank you. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, hi Lisa.
Great. Hi, I'm Lisa Kingsbury. I'm the Associate Director of Planning at UVM. And on behalf of the university, I just want to take a moment to thank the city staff, the commissioners, and the members of the public who've been working on this zoning change to enable the creation of housing for both undergraduate and graduate students on Trinity campus. We began this process back in January with the City Council. And since then, we've had several meetings with this commission, as well as discussion with the Ward 1-8 NPA in February and a public meeting in June. UVM is committed to being part of the solution of the housing challenge that affects our faculty, staff, and students, as well as the greater community. We have a longstanding commitment to housing our students with a 2-year requirement for students to live on campus, which is significantly higher than most of our peer institutions. New housing facilities would allow even more of our students to comfortably reside on campus, relieving some of the pressures on local communities and allowing us to continue to meet our commitment, even with possible fluctuations in enrollment. And as Keith just pointed out, with only 9% of our on-campus students currently housed at Trinity campus, there's a capacity with a proposed rezoning to add additional housing, transforming Trinity into a more vibrant and desirable campus for our students to live. This potential is recognized in our draft 2022 to 2032 campus plan, as well as in Mayor Weinberger's 10-point housing action plan. This draft amendment has been well vetted, and in addition to the changes to the zoning, it introduces the new submission requirement, which will help the city better understand UVM's long-range planning and how individual projects may relate to any forecasted changes in enrollment or employment, and how they relate to the recommendations of our campus plan and the joint institutional parking and management plan. So I want to thank you again for your time and consideration and urge you to approve the draft language as it's been presented and refer it to City Council to continue this process. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. Next, we'll go to Tom Darenthal. Tom, you've got the mic.
Can you hear me?
Yes, hi, Tom.
Okay, hi. Yeah, my name's Tom Darenthal. I live about a block from the Trinity campus, and while the increase in student count on the campus is, at least to me personally, not a big deal, what is that the students, if the students are not upperclassmen, this will be a way for UVM to increase their total student count, and it'll turn out that after a couple of years in on-campus housing, these students will then be looking in the neighborhood for rentals, which will drive the cost of housing even higher than it is now. And I don't believe, and Lisa would know for sure, if there's any agreement between the city and UVM for to put housing on campus targeting upperclassmen. And if not, then I think this is just going to make the whole Burlington housing environment more expensive. And sort of picking up on one of the points that Keith made, it'll make it very difficult for families and even professionals who want to, after attending UVM, stay in Burlington to be able to afford to stay here. And I'm dismayed that, and correct me if I'm wrong, that after many years with a memo of understanding between the city and UVM, that there no longer is one in place. And so no matter what the rules that are set by the city or the agreements or the plan that UVM states, everything's subject to change because there really isn't any handshake between the two entities. So that's where I sit. Thanks.
Thanks, Tom. Next, we'll go to Jason Van Driesch, and then after Jason, we'll go to Sharon Bushor and then Bob Butani. It appears we may have lost Jason.
One second. Did he just? There he is. Let me just.
Hi,
There you
Hi,
go,
Jason.
Jason. Yep.
I never got the option to unmute. Thank you for having me. My name is Jason Van Driesch. I live on the south side of Burlington in the Five Sisters neighborhood. I will speak also to the South End proposal when that's on the agenda, but I just wanted to say a few words about the Trinity proposal. I don't know enough about the details to speak to any of the specifics, but I just wanted to voice my support for the overall thrust of what is being done here. It's very clear, driving, walking, biking by that piece of land, that there's a lot of open land that really isn't particularly well used there, and could be put to much better use for productive uses for housing students. This amendment clearly facilitates that. And again, I don't have any comments on the details, just a general vote of support for moving ahead. Thank you.
Thanks, Jason. Next, we're going to go to Sharon Busher. Sharon, I believe you can speak.
Yes. I think you unmuted me first before you did, Jason. So anyways, yeah, I'm one of the people that is obviously on the phone. And it said that I needed something about a commercial. So I don't know. It was very bizarre, but I couldn't get in even after all of you took the time to send me screenshots. Those links just led to the same failure, but thank you. And I'm glad that you're going to continue this at your next meeting, because I'm not sure how many people were discouraged and just didn't take the time to phone in. I sent a communication, which I don't know if any of you can see because of the problems with Zoom. It came this morning, and I sent it to Andy and to Megan and to Charles, but to make sure that everybody on the commission received it. And it was really a recap as I reflected through the whole process of how we got to where we are. And where we are is that UVM came in with a request, and the Planning Commission is approving it without any modifications or to that request. And I reflected, so just to touch a little bit on what I had to say in that memo, was that the city has identified, when they looked at their housing crisis in the housing plan, they identified existing parking lots as primary sites where there could be conversion to housing. And I'm very disappointed that that didn't transcend to the institutions. Going back to the site visit and just going back to the overall discussion, the discussion began when UVM first presented to the Planning Commission. And I know Alex isn't there tonight, but Alex asked, why were they going to wait for a process for rezoning? Why didn't they build on the existing parking lot that was between UHC and Waterman, which is on South Williams? And UVM's response was they weren't ready to do that. And I find that odd, since Hill Garden, which is right across the street on South Williams, if you ask any student there, it's like the ideal place to live. You're not on campus, but you're at campus. And so I found that as an odd comment, one that I keep reflecting on, and that was at the beginning. The site visit, of course, it rained, but Barbara Hedrick and I had walked that campus in better weather. And we tried to direct you to the expansive parking lot behind Delahanty, and well, Mann, but Delahanty mainly. And just tried to draw attention to the fact that why wasn't that being considered, or at least explored, to put housing? Now, why am I saying that? Because I think that Trinity is a small campus. It's not like Redstone that Keith Pillsbury was talking about. It is a small campus, and all of you saw that. And there's a slope so that not all of that land is usable. And there's only that limited open green space for students to enjoy, or for whatever, for future plans. And so the point that I keep making is, why not use the existing area that's already covered, and you don't have to remove parking, you can build above it. I don't really know why that didn't have any traction or had any exploration. What was concerning for me was that it was put out there and it was never really even discussed as a viable option. And to me, that is a viable option, and it's consistent with what the city thinks is the right way to go for development also. I'm hearing people that are really linked to the bicycle because of the environment, but yet they're not saying that open space and trees matter for the environment. When you cover things with concrete, when you take away that green space, you're going to raise the temperature, and the temperature of the earth is slated to increase at least by 1.5 degrees in the next few years. That is so significant, and it's happening faster. Every time they reevaluate, it's going to happen sooner than the last time. So to eliminate trees, to eliminate green space, not to take advantage of already covered areas, to me, is not environmentally sound. And so I really would like you to move forward with the proposed part of the amendment that allows UVM to build up those 8 stories. Ward 1 has never been opposed to that height that's set back a little bit from the street, and allow them to build those, but to wait for the second part of that amendment, that is development within 45 feet, to let them explore those other options. And then if those fail, to come back. I think that is what I would love to see happen tonight, or in the future as this process moves forward. I did add a note, and I said this before, that the chair of this commission, had great vision, and years ago said before UVM should be allowed to cover any more green space, they should build over their existing parking lots. That statement was made many years ago, but it couldn't be truer today because of the environmental situation we face. So I'm really hoping that you will consider what I have to say and potentially modify what you are about to move forward. The last piece I wanted to mention was that I think Tom Darenthal said it better than many people regarding the fact that we had a conversation about who was going to live in some of the housing being created, and Vice President Kate said that he couldn't mandate upperclassmen to live at Trinity campus. What he was aware by internal surveys, and I know Lisa's here on maybe listening still, but their own internal survey suggested that the lofts buildings on Redstone were more desirable for upperclassmen if they chose to stay on campus. And so that might be what would happen, that they would build underclass housing and free up some of those spaces and make accommodations for more juniors and seniors to live on campus in that location. But I think that what Tom mentioned and what others mentioned also is that just because UVM is going to build housing doesn't mean that we will get relief in our neighborhoods, because if they can't force people, upper class people, to live on campus, then after sophomore year, people are going to go into the neighborhoods. And so as their enrollment increases, there will be greater stress on the housing market, as Tom said. I think that's a reality. I think that if you look at all the numbers, there's no way around that. It's not pointing fingers, it's just the way it is. And so I am concerned about this. I'm concerned about the loss of the MOU, and the fact that UVM and the city can't come together to realize that we have a shared problem that is created by the wonderful university that happens to be part of the city of Burlington, but also brings this particular housing crisis and problem to us. So thank you so much for listening. And I hope that the link gets improved because this really is lousy. I'm used to zooming in and being able to access the agenda and any information. So Megan and Charles, were there other written communications sent? If you could speak to that at some point so that the rest of us would know about those, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
I will just
Charles?
speak to that quickly. We did receive one other written communication from Bruce Seifer, but Bruce actually let us know earlier today that he wasn't able to attend tonight's meeting. I did forward that communication to the commission. Given that it appears that we're going to re-advertise the public hearing, I'll reserve Bruce's comment for that time in hopes that he can attend in person and communicate that himself. If not, we will communicate it or include it in your packet in the next meeting. If that's what you choose to do. That comment was specific to the South End rezoning. So if we do decide to take comment and then resume the hearing later, we can do it then. We do have one more member of the public ready to speak tonight to Trinity, and that's Bob Butani. Bob, I will unmute you now.
Oh, sorry. I think you had my last name incorrect. So I was that was the delay in responding.
So sorry.
It's okay. So a couple questions. One is I'm curious as to I don't necessarily have an opinion on this, but I'm curious.
I'm sorry. I'm just going to quickly interrupt just for the record. Is this not Bob Butani?
No, it's Bob Duncan.
Oh, Bob Duncan. Okay, thank you.
All right.
We'll make sure to get to you next then, Bob Butani.
Okay, sorry.
Go ahead, Bob Duncan.
Okay, so I'm not sure that I have a particular opinion on this, but I was curious as to how you arrived at the 65-foot buffer dimension. And I was also curious in looking at the drawing that's part of the proposed amendment. The language says that 65 feet is measured from the center line of Colchester Avenue. And I'm curious as to actually if that line that's on the drawing is drawn 65 feet from Colchester Avenue or not. And if it is, can you tell me what the actual dimension would be roughly from the sidewalk to that 65-foot line? Because I just want to make sure that folks understand that this area of proposed non-development, but for a 200 square foot, accessory structure or something, how much is that? And I'm guessing that from the center line of Colchester Avenue to the edge of the sidewalk is probably somewhere around 30 to 35 feet. So that would mean that this open space, the 65-foot buffer line, is really yielding about 30 to 35 feet of open space. And I just want to make sure that folks weren't thinking that from the sidewalk, the 65 feet was the buffer. So there's a couple questions there. And then I was also wondering, some of the buildings on the Trinity campus are historic. There will be some who would argue about how important or how iconic they are. But has there been any consideration in the drafting of this ordinance to protect any of those buildings, or are they only protected to the extent they would be protected by other language in the ordinance? And those are my questions.
Okay, thanks, Bob. I captured those questions just as a matter of procedure. We don't usually answer questions during the public hearing, but I wrote them down if the commission would like us to answer them.
Okay.
Charles, do we have anybody else?
We do not, Andy.
We do have Bob
Oh.
Butani. I think they're on a phone, so they can't raise their hand.
Okay. Bob Butani, are you able to speak now?
Bob, you'll need to unmute yourself.
Star 6 to unmute.
Got it. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, well, thank you very much. A lot of Bobs bouncing around, and just want to thank Megan Tuttle for valiantly trying to get us into Zoom, but we were unable to do so. I'm sitting here with my neighbor, Nancy Kirby, and there's not much that I can add to what Sharon and Tom Derenthal previously said, but I fully back Sharon's position. I believe that UVM should explore ways to build over existing parking lots. That said, with respect to the increased enrollment of undergraduates by UVM's own numbers, 72 to 75% of juniors choose to live off campus once they become juniors. And I've tried on several occasions to get a straight answer out of Richard Cape, but he just can't, I can't fathom what UVM plans to do with the amounts of students that will be descending onto the Burlington housing market, which currently has a 0.5% vacancy rate, to my understanding. And, it's unconscionable and will only exacerbate the housing crisis that currently exists in Burlington. I don't know where housing will be built for working people who would like to start a family here. It's just impossible. There's just not enough housing. And I understand UVM's position that they want to increase enrollment, but it would be done at the expense of the neighborhood. Thank you very much. Nancy?
Yes. Hi, it's Nancy Kirby again. Thank you for all of you putting all your information and work into this project. I have not been in the best health this summer, so I kind of stepped back away from everything, but I've been in touch with Sharon and Bob and some of my neighbors on Colchester Avenue. And I recognize that UVM needs housing, but this is Burlington, our community. And you need to recognize that the more students that come off from UVM's campus because they choose not to live there is detrimental to the neighborhood. Detrimental to downtown even, because they live downtown. I work downtown, and I'm just very concerned that the green space will be gone. And once it's gone, there's no coming back. With climate change and everything else that's going on around here, I agree with Sharon. I think we should make use of the concrete parking lots that we already have. UVM has plenty of those. And I'm not crazy about how close those buildings will be to the sidewalk. I'm terribly sorry, but it sort of makes me feel like Colchester Avenue is going to look like Main Street, Winooski, with these really tall, inappropriate looking construction. Nothing beautiful about it, right on the sidewalk. And I realize that our mayor and the city council are all concerned about housing, and they're talking about putting up housing down at the city space. Well, only 90 units are going to be affordable there. The rest is going to be far too expensive. You're forcing people that have lived in Burlington with their families, you're forcing them out of Burlington. They can't afford to live here. And with the pandemic, it's made the prices of housing more expensive. People are being outbid. And even take a look at the car industry. You can't even buy a decent used car for what the value should be. And I know you probably think I'm running off at the mouth, but listen, you allow public hearings. You used to allow us to come to the meetings. Now we have to Zoom. I think it's impersonal. I know a lot of people like it, but I don't like it. I like to be able to come to a meeting so you know who I am. And most of you on your committee know who I am. I've been in this neighborhood of Colchester Avenue, Fletcher Place, Tebow Parkway 48 years. I grew up in the old North End of Burlington. I've had a business for 48 years downtown. And I think it's time you listen to the community, not just UVM. This isn't the city of the University of Vermont. This is the Queen City of Burlington, Vermont. Please listen to the people that live in this neighborhood and what you're going to do to this neighborhood. And it's not about not in my backyard. That's not what it's about. Let's do some sensible thinking in building here. The traffic has gotten increasingly bad. You really need to think about this, okay? Save some of our green space in our neighborhood. And please, if you're going to have these public meetings, think about what we're saying and don't come to your meeting with your mind made up, because sometimes it makes me feel like you're pacifying us. And that's not the way this community should be run. Thank you for my time.
Thank you. Charles, anyone else?
We do not have anybody else right now, Andy.
Okay, so as we mentioned earlier, because of the technical difficulties of people being able to get in tonight, we're not going to close the hearing tonight, but we will we'll hold off till next time. We'll recess it, I guess, until our next meeting, and have a second public hearing on this.
Andy, if I could just quickly interject on that point, I think that
Yes.
that is a good plan, instead of holding a new public hearing, to actually move that you will continue the hearing to your next meeting. So I would actually recommend that that be made as a motion that the commission votes on.
Okay. Is there a motion along those lines?
I move that we continue this hearing till the next meeting. This is Alex.
Motion by Alex. Is there a second?
I second the motion by Alex to extend the hearing.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye. I can't see you raising your hand, so say aye.
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 Any opposed? So that's what we'll do on the public hearing side of it. Before we close out this item, are there any comments or questions from the commission? And obviously we'll have a chance as well to weigh in at our next meeting as well. I don't hear anyone. So we'll close out this item. Thank you for those who spoke tonight. And again, there'll be an opportunity for others to speak at our next meeting. And we'll move on to item
Andy,
six.
sorry, I'm only interjecting just because I know you can't see. Sorry for interrupting you so much.
That's fine.
I did just want to let the commission know and members of the public know that after your last meeting and discussion about this amendment, we did get a couple questions and notes about kind of technical corrections to what had been provided to you from the DPI team. These don't change the substance of the amendment at all, but we had planned to introduce them to you tonight for your consideration. Given that we're continuing this hearing to your next meeting, we can put them in your packet and talk about them at your next meeting. But just wanted to make sure for everyone's transparency that that was shared with you.
Okay, great. Thanks for letting us know, Megan. Okay, so unless somebody else interrupts me, which is fine because I can't see otherwise or hear otherwise, we'll close item 5 and move on to item 6, which again is the public hearing for the proposed ZA-23-01 South End Innovation District. And Charles, again, or Megan, whichever, do you want to give an introduction? And again, if anybody wants to speak, you just need to interrupt because I can't see otherwise.
Sure, thanks, Andy. Yes, the next amendment, ZA-2301, the South End Innovation District, is an amendment that is fairly comprehensive for about 70 acres of a core area of the existing Enterprise Light Manufacturing District. This zoning amendment comes really out of two places in recent sort of planning history in Burlington. The first Plan BTV South End called for the creation of a South End Innovation District that could foster and protect the arts and making community in the South End while also making space for a burgeoning office market in the South End. The second sort of catalyst here is the caused by a generally acknowledged housing shortage and crisis. The 2021 Housing as a Human Right Action Plan, which called for the creation of more housing units in the city of Burlington in a few places, one of those specifically being the South End. And so this South End Innovation District would do a few things. It would permit housing for the first time in this core area of the Enterprise Light Manufacturing District, and would provide a whole host of urban design and land use standards for the development of the district. We'll leave it at that high-level summary. Happy to answer any questions later if you so choose to pose them.
Okay, thank you, Charles. And with that, we will open up our public hearing. Again, this is an opportunity for members of the public to speak on this item and give us your views. And Charles, I'll turn it over to you to recognize people who'd like to speak.
All right, we're going to start our queue here with Sean Foley, and then we'll go to Jason Van Drysch. Again, if you're here from the public and you would like to speak to the South End Innovation District Amendment, please use the raise hand icon at the bottom of your screen. So again, we'll start with Sean.
Yes, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Yes. Yes, I live in Ward 5, and I've been to one or two of these meetings, and I've expressed my concern about the size of the buildings that are being proposed. The 6 to 8 story buildings in that area would have a significant impact on the view shed of the Five Sister neighborhood, the Birchcliff Park neighborhood, and Callahan Park neighborhood. Previously, in a previous hearing, one of the commission members had questioned about whether there would be an impact on the view shed from Callahan Park, and I think the response was not as informed as I wish it had. Callahan Park, if you go right now, the view shed goes the whole length of this area. It goes from some Sears Lane all the way down to Burlington Electric Department. And 8 story buildings would be higher than the old GE building and the view shed right now. And I think that these buildings would be very different than the whole structure down there. And I understand that downtown has these larger buildings, but this would be sticking out like a sore thumb. And I just would implore you to look at alternatives to these larger buildings. I know there's a need for housing, but the higher buildings are not going to be low income. They're going to be all more expensive apartments. And I'm just expressing my concern. I think the size variance, the height variance on these items is just way too hard. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you.
All right, next we'll go to Jason Van Drysch.
Thank you. So this one's much closer to home for me. I live on the end of Caroline Street, right by Callahan Park, and down through the area covered by this district on a regular basis for one reason or another. And while there are specifics in the proposal that I might quibble with, the overall thrust of it is, to my mind, very much in the right direction. It's a real travesty that the giant parking lot across from the Innovation Center has remained 6 acres of asphalt for so long. And clearly this is aimed at changing that, among other things, which is great. There's one thing that I wanted to highlight, which I imagine is already on your radar, but which I know is a DPW issue rather than a planning issue, but is really central to making this all work. which is stormwater capacity for new development in this area. And one of the things that I'm concerned about is whether new development in this area will trigger stormwater management requirements that might be very difficult to meet, even though currently large portions of the area are literally as bad as you can get from a stormwater perspective, i.e. nothing but asphalt that discharges straight to the nearest waterway. So I hope that from a stormwater perspective, we won't let the perfect be the enemy of the good in this case, and allow new development to trigger requirements that are impossible to meet when almost anything is going to be an improvement stormwater wise over what's there now. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Andy, next we'll go to Jane Van Buren.
Hi, this is actually Gigi Weissman. I'm married to Jane. J.E. Weissman is my real name, I suppose. And I thank you in advance for writing me when I was asking some questions earlier. And I also had large concerns about the stormwater. I am a pedestrian when I'm not driving to work. And I couldn't help but notice sign after sign posted just last weekend, and how many times I've been in the area since 1985. I was in the New North End and now I'm in the South End. And beaches have been closed and closed and closed. And I feel that having an 8-story building with all of the plumbing that will be needed for all of the people and pets, that it's just too much so close to the lake. I think the lake is suffering. Many of us won't eat fish from the lake. So I wanted to bring that up. As a pedestrian, I also want to bring up that it's really hard to get around on foot. I'm knowing that there's a whole lot of construction around traffic rerouting. I'm not convinced it's going to help Pine Street at all. Just building wonderful breweries has impacted my ability to get across the street safely. Even with flashing lights and crosswalks, I can't imagine if I was needing mobility support or had little ones, how scary that might be. I'm also wanting us not to move quickly without considering our South Burlington neighbors as well with what's going on with the higher ground. Many a thing that's being built that will create traffic, noise pollution, light pollution. We will be in the shade. Somebody brought up the wonderful Cathedral Square in the last conversation. It is wonderful, and Westlake put it right in a shadow. And so we have to be aware of that. One thing that I would like to stress is yes to supporting housing and yes to smaller buildings, but I think 8 stories, you didn't hear me complain when they were being suggested in a downtown area. I don't think they belong by the lake. Thank you.
Thank you.
Andy, we do not have any other speakers who have raised their hand at the moment.
Okay.
Oh,
then,
we do. We just got John Callow here.
John Callow will unmute you.
Hi, can you hear me?
yes,
Yes.
thank you.
Good.
Yeah.
Good evening. John Callow, I'm representing the owners of 125 Lakeside Avenue. That's one of the parcels that would be affected by the proposed zoning amendment. And also speaking as a resident of the South End, I've lived in the Lakeside neighborhood for more than 10 years and plan to continue to living here. As you know, Lakeside neighborhood is directly adjacent to the parcel on 125 Lakeside and is as well as the proposed South End Innovation District. So I want to speak in favor of the proposed amendment. I think it provides an affirmative answer to the primary question of identifying appropriate locations within the ELM zone that are appropriate for housing. I think in doing so, the amendment reconciles the non-residential purpose of the enterprise district, which is contained in the ordinance, by introducing a new mixed use overlay within a limited area of that ELM zone. And in doing so, it prioritizes the creation of new housing opportunities in a manner that support the economic development goals of the district. So going back to something that Charles indicated earlier is that, well, yes, the housing crisis is one of the movers or the catalyst for this, but it's good to remember that this is tying into the larger goals of economic development that has always been the hallmark of the ELM district. So I think that I'm in support of these goals and objectives that are going to guide the future development of the building sites, the open space and the vehicular and pedestrian pathways throughout the district. And there's a lot of forward-looking goals in the language. Having said that, there's some things that I have some technical issues that I have some concerns about that I'd just like to share with you. But before I do, I want to give a shout out to the planning staff, Megan Tuttle and Charles, as well as other members of South End stakeholders, and all of the work that's gone into creating this, getting us to this part. It's a process, and I'm really grateful for the work that they've done on our behalf. Okay, so some of my specific concerns, I think, are just really in maybe perhaps terms and understanding terms that are used in the ordinance that we may be familiar with, but when an actual application comes in, may cause a different interpretation by other members of the city staff. For example, streets, shared use paths, roads are oftentimes in the ordinance, by my reading, used interchangeably. And so it's unclear whether these are, again, going to be considered public rights of way, but they will influence how any parcel within the district is developed. Again, the idea of having a very pedestrian-friendly, car-free environment that can be safely accessed by fire vehicles has got a lot of appeal. Anyone who has traveled to other cities and that has seen it, it's a wonderful experience, and one that we share and want to embody. But it's really kind of just understanding, is this something that DPW, which has jurisdiction over all of the roadways in the city, have they signed on to this? So that's and the reason why it's important, I think, is that one of the hallmarks of this proposed ordinance is to create a lot system or block system that's based on a 1,600 lineal foot circumference that could be measured by these shared use paths or bike paths or whatever we want to call them. And again, it's just I'm just a little bit, based on my experience, just unsure whether or not this has already been vetted internally. So and this kind of comes into play at the lines 82 to 84 within the ordinance. Down to the actual specific regulations, there's one of the regulations is maximum building size, and there's a proposal to maximize a footprint to 15,000 square feet. And I think I understand the rationale behind that. But we're just wondering whether or not, which I think is to create microclimates or a streetscape environment that is projects the type of livability that we aspire to. But I just really wonder whether or not having hard and fast, thou shalt not be any more than 15,000 square feet really services the purpose, because there's always going to be an exception to that rule. And that once the rule is put in place, it's going to be really difficult to undo. To put it a different way, a rule like this could prevent a good idea from actually happening, a good design idea. While there's not a lot of examples of large building footprints, there is one, a recent one in Burlington, the student apartment project that Champlain College constructed at 194 St. Paul Street. It fits the site wonderfully. Regardless, I've never heard a negative comment about it. It has a footprint of 28,500 square feet and is surrounded by buildings that are mostly 2 to 3 stories tall. So it can be very contextual. So I don't know what the answer is in this one, but it just that perhaps being a little bit more open-ended may be helpful. Again, with the frontage and ground floor activation standards, which are sort of expressed in table 4.5.8.2. I think that one of the things that concerns us is that any development that may occur on any of the affected parcels, we believe that whatever development program results should be able to work regardless of the type of ownership, whether or not it's under one ownership or if the project is subdivided into multiple lots. It should work in either configuration, but it's just really unclear, the ordinance is in terms of how the ordinance would treat that. Number one. Number two, it doesn't appear to really treat phased development, and no one is going to snap their fingers. And in the case of the parcel at 125 Lakeside Avenue, given some of the infrastructural challenges, among other things, just market absorption, it's not going to happen overnight. It will be a phased development. However, which typically I think under the ordinance is a PUD vehicle. And I'm just not sure that, I know that PUDs are not permitted in this particular district. So, a partial solution to what I'm talking about might be that inclusion. I think the third thing that concerns me is just the use table and the division of primary and secondary uses. And I'm not sure it supports the goal of having a robust urban neighborhood. Number one, because there's a lot of uses that are on the secondary side that appear to me could be easily something that if I was living in that neighborhood, I would want, that I ready pedestrian access to. Number one. Number two, the way it's set up, it would require potentially an inordinate amount of excess square footage to be devoted to non-residential development. The way it's currently worded is that if there are these secondary uses, you add up the sum total of them, and let's say that adds up to 80,000 square feet, then you need to have at least 80,000 feet of primary non-residential development. So on our site, if there was an interest in developing a extended stay hotel, for example, to assist those new employees working at Hula who haven't found their permanent housing yet, that a product like that, we would have, if it was 80,000 square feet, we would have to find another 80,000 square feet of primary residential space. And I wonder, basically, what is the problem we're trying to solve? We have a very dynamic and fluid real estate market. I mean, who would guess that we'd be having a conversation about housing in the South End in 2015 or 2018? So, I just think that when my concern is that some of the goals or uses that are identified, we may be rethinking them, and it may be better to be somewhat more open-ended and come up with just a definitive list of these are the ground floor uses that we think will be appropriate in a place like this, and let it go. That's just a suggestion. I think that in general that concludes my remarks. I really appreciate the opportunity to collaborate with the staff on this and with the commission, and I look forward to seeing this adopted in the very near future.
Hey, thank you.
Andy, our
Carl,
next
Megan?
speaker is Jasmine Walker.
Good
Jasmine,
evening.
are you
Can hear
there?
me?
Good evening.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Great.
go ahead.
My name is Hollis Easter. I'm Jasmine's husband. And I wanted to say thank you to everyone for all the work you've put in on this. Our family lives in the Birchcliff neighborhood. Our son was born here. I'm in my early 40s and I'm hoping to stay here for as long as possible. And so I really rejoice in the idea of development that promotes a walkable, bikeable city. I have a couple of concerns about the project, the way I read it, that I wanted to ask about. One of them, I think the last time I spoke to the Planning Commission was about height restrictions. And it seems like from the part of the South End that we're talking about, the 45-foot height restriction that I believe is in place already is already a pretty big change from most of what exists there. And expanding that to 85 feet feels like it creates, that we've spoken about viewshed, we've spoken about stormwater, we've spoken about, sewerage, all those kinds of things. And I'm not sold entirely on the idea that that's necessary. And also it increases the scope of the project that somebody thinks is going to be worth building there. We've seen other places in the downtown, for example, that large projects don't necessarily get built in an expeditious manner. So I'm a little worried that we're going to spend a lot of time about that and get nothing, or get another hole in the ground where there isn't even parking anymore, let alone a place where people can live. I also just want to note an equal treatment under the law concern. People in the city of Burlington often feel that it's very hard to get a planning variance for the ability to put a second story on their home. And I've heard that from, so many people that I couldn't count them. And it seems as though nobody is bending over backwards to say we should just change the rules so that you can do what you want. But doubling the height of an already high building feels like it's something that we just take for granted is necessary for economic development or something. And that feels unequitable to me. So that was one piece that I wanted to talk about. The other thing I just wanted to say, again, I'm really excited about the idea of going and walking around, and I get it. Like, Burlington is a city. I grew up in a small town and this isn't that. I like the idea of some more density. I really, we just saw a note from the mayor by email this week about some of the plans for addressing homelessness, and housing availability is seemingly the core issue, for so many problems we're dealing with. I saw there's a caveat in the proposed amendment saying we were originally going to say there were no hotels here, but now we think that we can still do that. I feel like that dilutes both the substance and the message of what's being offered here. If we're saying that we need all hands on deck for as much housing as possible, I don't really understand how permitting new hotels in what's supposed to be a residential neighborhood is in service of that. And it does, I think, legitimately raise the question of, is this some sort of Trojan horse for a different kind of development rather than what's being spoken about directly? And so I guess those are the parts of the plan that feel concerning to me. I also want to echo, I'm not as knowledgeable about some of these other parts, but I really do, I'm curious about what the answers are to how do we get fire trucks in? How do we get the sewer water out? How do we have enough water infrastructure to bring things in and make sure that that can actually happen in a way that gets built rather than not just planned? So with that, I will keep my remark brief and thank you for your time. And I hope you have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. Charles, do we have anyone else?
We do not, Andy.
All right. So we're going to close out for tonight, but as we did with the other hearing, we're not closing this all together. We're going to continue it to our next meeting because of the difficulties that some people have had getting into this meeting. So do I have a motion from the commission to continue this public hearing till our next meeting?
Emily, yeah, I was
Motion
gonna
to
say he can't see
continue
you.
this for this public hearing to the next meeting.
Okay, so we have a motion by Emily. Is there a second?
I second the motion to continue this to the next meeting.
We have our second. Any further discussion on this? Right, all those in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Great, so that's unanimous. We'll continue it till our next meeting. Before we close this item
Andy,
all
if-
together,
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just
I was
gonna
just
say, and I don't know if Charles wants to speak to this briefly, but similar to the Trinity Amendment, we had actually planned to talk to you about a number of recommendations tonight that actually speak to some of the questions, not all of the questions that you heard from John Kahlo, things that we have continued to work through in terms of trying to ground truth this amendment and felt like were appropriate recommendations for your consideration. So Charles, I don't know if you wanted to say anything about what some of those points might have been.
Yeah, thanks. So to the commissioners, you should have received a memo regarding a potential addition to the amendment to allow very limited exemptions to the floor plate standard to facilitate in the near term construction of larger format parking structures. So that is one of the sort of substantive revisions that we could bring forth to you in a revised amendment. A minor revision to the parking standard that would allow 2 ingress and egress points per facade. In the amendment today, it is limited to 1 per frontage. There's Mr. Kahlo spoke to the planned unit development. That's already something that we had been proposing to recommend to you, is that planned unit development should be permitted in the Enterprise Light Manufacturing District. That would facilitate the phased redevelopment of these larger sites in the district. And a very technical correction to the use table to make the language consistent in reference to secondary permitted land uses. That's it right now. It is possible that we could come forward with additional revisions at the next hearing or at your continued hearing.
Okay, thank you, Charles. And before we close this item out completely, are there any questions, comments from the commission? Obviously, we'll have an opportunity to speak in more detail at our next meeting on this. I don't hear from anyone.
Bruce has his hand raised, Andy.
Oh,
Right, Andy.
go ahead. Bruce.
I think it would be helpful to see how staff would address some, particularly with the wording, some of the concerns that John Kahlo and others may have raised, particularly John.
Yeah, I mean, we can, I think helpful to be able to see those concerns articulated in writing as well. And we can share our thoughts with you about what we would recommend in response to those questions. Again, as Charles and I had said, some of those were already on the radar that we were going to talk to you about. So we'll make sure to look through the other ones that were not on that list.
Yeah, and then as I understand it, there is a forthcoming communication from John Kahlo that if we receive it, we will include that in your packet for next time.
And I do, if it's okay, Andy, I know we're not in the habit of speaking to a lot of these public comments, but I did just think that the comment from Hollis at the end about, you know, how we consider different zoning issues in the city is just important to speak to really quickly. The commission knows, you know, very well aware of the fact that in addition to the 2 amendments that we're talking about tonight, there is another major zoning amendment that our office is working on that looks at, you know, how to make our zoning for neighborhoods more friendly to more homes in those neighborhoods. So if you're still here, Hollis, I think, you know, we look forward to you being able to learn more about that as we get further into that work.
Great, thanks for that reminder, Megan. Anyone else before we close this out? I'm in. Don't hear anyone. So
There's
we'll
no
close
hands,
that out.
Andy.
I just have one quick
Sorry.
question. It would be great to have more information as we continue this about the office space floor plate needs. That was something that came up a few weeks ago at the end of our discussion. And I think it would be great to have more information about that. Hopefully Yves can be here for that discussion and share his expertise on that.
Good, thanks for that comment. Anyone else? And again, just chime right in because I can't see you. Okay, don't hear anyone. So we'll close that out now and move on to item 7, which are commissioner items. Any commissioner items or committee reports? Just go ahead if you have something.
Emily, go ahead.
No.
My commissioner item is about, I've asked this before and it seems like the problem's getting a lot worse. The former YMCA building. It has just gotten, it's out of control, the graffiti and the vandalism on that building. And I know that other communities have ordinances around fencing off stairwells and second stories to prevent people from climbing up buildings, and ordinances with fines around maintenance of buildings. First of all, what's happening with that building in the process? Why is it languishing? And what can we do to encourage, enforce, coerce the owner to clean that building up?
And just, if
Go
I
ahead,
could just
Andy.
add on that, we do have, I think, the abandoned building ordinance that I'm not sure if that would apply to this building.
I have some insight, maybe I could share for a sec.
Sure.
It's currently under foreclosure from a client of mine, an out-of-state owner who really did not do much. And my client has reached out to the city to try to enlist some help because the court systems are really sclerotic right now. They just can't get things through. So this developer is essentially just stall. And it could be years before anything happens to that building. And of course, the bank wants to preserve it, but nothing's being done to do that. And can't really force it to happen.
So Emily, I have also asked the questions that you've asked about tools that we have available to us of Bill Ward, because this really is more of an issue that the enforcement team and the building inspectors have purview over. You know, I think what he has said before is that while we do have some ordinances in place, I think the main issue that could address is just the issue of graffiti. And unfortunately, that's just a matter of writing tickets. So it would mean really needing to elevate some of that. I know you've asked about fencing, and it's been a little while since I've talked to Bill about this, but he did say that he was asking our building inspector to schedule a date to go out and look at the building for the purposes of figuring out what some of the violations are and what potential remedies there could be in order to kind of work with the property owner around some of those security issues. I know some of the suggestions that they have heard about securing that building would require some right-of-way obstructions. And so there were some reservations about doing things that might block the sidewalk or create other safety issues, kind of in an effort to try to solve one problem. So I'm happy to kind of connect you via email directly to Bill, but I do think that this is an issue that you need to talk to Bill and probably your city councilors about. There's not a lot within our toolbox that we have available to us.
What is the abandoned building ordinance, or what is that tool?
Again, I think it's mostly just like about writing tickets around kind of the maintenance of those properties. But Bill would know the specifics.
It's an enforcement issue around ordinance, because it's it's become a really big eyesore in the neighborhood, and it's attracting vandals. And I'm also just concerned about the maintenance of the building. It's a historic building, and if you look at what's happening with the Moran plant, if you don't maintain a historic building, things go very, very wrong. Like water pipes break and pipes freeze. Somebody walks on the roof and there's a hole in the roof, and then you get irreparable damage that really puts us, what I consider to be a very gorgeous structure in Burlington at risk. So
yeah, and I do know that the plan that had been considered for that building that Bruce mentioned, the owner is not able to advance, was intending to preserve that historic building that is at the intersection of College and Union, while demolishing the newer building that's on the back. And I do think that where the city has been trying to kind of help is by like we're doing in other areas of the city, public and private buildings alike, going out and trying to paint over graffiti when it's happening. Their focus has been on that newer building portion because they knew it's going to be demolished. So we were really sensitive to not wanting to paint over the historic building elements in a way that could, damage the building itself. So I think that's also one of the challenges, is that some of the tools that we have available to us to counteract graffiti, we want to be very careful about applying to the historic piece of the structure. So like I said, I'm happy to have you connect with Bill, because I think that would be.
I guess I'll reach out. I have a good relationship with Bill, and I could reach out to him.
Okay.
Thanks.
As we're discussing this might be a good one to ask Bill to come and address the full commission on, because there may be some tools that we may be lacking that we may want to consider, talking about or implementing, that would give the city more of an ability to deal with issues like this.
Yeah,
So
and I do know the council ordinance. Oh, I'm sorry, Andy.
Yeah, so it might be good for us to hear from Bill. I mean, obviously, Emily, you could reach out to him on your own, but it might be good to hear from him as a commission to see if there's anything else that we should be thinking about or doing.
So yeah, I think the last thing I'll just add is I do think that the council has been talking about this at some level. Again, Bill would be the best person to advise us directly on that, but I think at least one city councilor has taken an interest in kind of improving our ordinances with regard to this issue, especially after we had the structure fire on King Street. So yeah, I'm happy to see if he can speak to this. And I think one thing that I'll just share, and maybe this could be a forum for that conversation, is that Charles and I have talked with Scott Guston about finally resuming our joint meetings with the DRB, DAB, and Conservation Board. And since, Bill and his team are the ones that are responsible for overseeing this, that could be the venue in which we talk about this, if that's acceptable to the commission.
Yeah, that'd be great. Emily, thanks for bringing that up again. And are there any other commissioner items?
I just want to say thanks to the planning staff for organizing the missing middle housing trivia. I'm sorry, I'm dealing with some kittens here. You may have seen
That is
them
really
this
cute.
evening. If you'd like to meet them, they are right here. I feel like we could all use that. But anyway, thank you so much for organizing that event. That was a really great opportunity to learn more about missing middle housing in a fun way, and made me really excited about this process, and also great to see so many people who are engaged on the issue in the room. So I hope that that model can be used in the future to educate the public and kickstart these things. And it was also great to meet Michael in person there. So thanks so much.
Thanks for that, Julia.
Thanks, Julia. Anyone else?
Go ahead, Bruce.
Could you announce the date of the next meeting?
Yes, is it December 13th?
That's right. December 13th.
So your meeting schedule has been altered in November because your next meeting would have been scheduled next week, which is the week of Thanksgiving. And you only have just the one meeting in December, just so you know, because of the other holidays in December.
Good. Thank you. Anyone else? All right, we'll close out the item 7 and move on to item 8, which is minutes and communications. Is there a motion to approve the minutes and accept the communications? And just chime in.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes and accept the communications.
Okay, we have the motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
I think I heard a second. All those in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We have our minutes and communication, and final item is adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you. And a second?
I'll second that, Andy.
Perfect. So we have our motion and a second. All those in favor of adjournment, please say aye.
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 Aye. Good enough for me. We stand adjourned. Thank you all. And again, apologize for the technical difficulties that we had. So we couldn't all be by Zoom on this, and members of the public couldn't be by Zoom, but hopefully we'll have this all straightened out for our next meeting. So thanks again to everybody, and have a good night.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.